Well, good morning. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your patience as we all work through our technical challenges of the of this moment. I want to just start by saying congratulations. Thank you for what you all do, and definitely congratulations to the Minnesota Justice Research Center for this Reimagining Justice conference. We of course have had to reimagine the Reimagining Justice conference and reimagining kind of how we all get together, how we all kind of share these spaces. But I want to tell you, like, this is a space full of speakers and people who I greatly admire and whose work I've greatly admired for a really long time. Congratulations on landing Justin as your new executive director. I think that'll go incredibly well, and that'll be it feels, I think, to all of us like a really good match. And also thank you for the tribute to Tom Johnson. He was certainly somebody who has been critical in this work for a very long time, and whose leadership uh, continues to start pay dividends for our community. So thank you for that as well. The Minnesota Justice Research Center has been a very pivotal partner to the city of St. Paul, and particularly to my administration on a number of things, from our fines and fees justice work, and much more recently on our returning home St. Paul, which we'll speak about more in this session. And I'm just appreciate the opportunity to participate in this conversation. You know, I don't have to tell you, we're at a significant crossroads, not just in St. Paul and in Minnesota, but in America. The events of 2020 have hopefully shown us that until every family, as long as any family in our community can't afford a safe, stable home to shelter in place, as long as any worker can't take a week off of work to care for a sick child, or there's somebody in our community who can't go to the doctor when they're sick, that we're all less safe. And I think we've also seen in 2020 that as long as some of us have to be concerned, be worried about our relationship with the officers who are sworn to protect and serve our neighborhoods, that too makes us all less safe. Our hope and our mantra in my administration is no recovery. I share with my team all the time. We are not interested in recovering from all these events of 2020. And the reason is because recovery makes it feel like we're trying to get back to where we were 6 months ago, or back to where we were 6 years, or in some cases, 6 decades ago. But our goal and ambition has to be to move forward. It has to be to move forward to the type of economy where we wouldn't see what happens in 2020. We wouldn't see a record number of people homeless and hungry and unemployed, while we see record-breaking stock market returns and billionaire wealth grow by $1 trillion in our country. Where we wouldn't see the types of videos we were inundated with over the course of this summer, where we saw just some of the most horrific examples go viral of police encounters with residents in our community, where we wouldn't see the type of public health pandemic that ravages our country and frankly traces its lines, essentially a redlined pandemic that impacts our lowest income communities, that impacts our Black and brown communities, that impacts our communities of color, that impacts the communities that have been left behind by our community and by our country for far too long. My prayer is that we don't recover back to where we were at the beginning of this year, but that we push forward. That's our goal in St. Paul. That's the work that we're doing. We're pushing forward. We're certainly pushing forward the way we reimagine our justice system. We've rejected a framework of public safety that centers around only police, prisons, and prosecutors. We've seen how that works or doesn't work for our communities, for our country, for our police officers, for our neighborhoods, and we're pushing to a much broader perspective. The perspective is essentially that emergency response is important. That's an important part of our public safety framework. But if emergency response, which by definition is what happens after something terrible occurs, if that's the sum total of our public safety framework, is trying to get somebody there, a police officer, a firefighter, an ambulance there as soon as possible after something terrible occurs, well, that would be woefully insufficient. So our goal is to identify how we support our emergency responders. Our goal is to identify how we decouple uh, how our response to crime and violence from our response to people in crisis, We just launched a task force or a commission this week, whose task is going to be to help us dig into 911 calls and identify opportunities for social workers or mental health counselors or emergency housing counselors to respond to people in crisis, to help people out of crisis, while lightening the load for our officers so that our police officers can focus on responding to and preventing violent crime and playing basketball with kids in a park and do the type of community, kind of proactive community outreach. That's very important, but that's still response. We're also focused on identifying how do we identify what I always call our highest potential areas of our city and make investments in those areas in ways that reduce the likelihood that something terrible will happen there. If I put up a basketball hoop in my driveway, then people will play basketball in my driveway. They'll play basketball in my driveway because I put up the hoop. And that's an example of what we've learned, that the activities, the behaviors, the outcomes that exist in a space happen in direct response to the physical and aesthetic quality that we invest in or don't invest in that space. So you show me a neighborhood or you show me a block that we're most likely to see that to experience violent crime in our community. I'll show you a place that's most likely to have been underinvested in and disinvested in by the public sector over the last generation. That's what we have to turn around. So it's our highest potential areas, but then it's also our highest potential individuals. That's very critical as well. The same is exactly true. We need everyone in our community to be able to have access to housing, to be able to have access to healthcare, to be able to have access to employment, to be able to get a good job in our community. I share the example, we're coming up on the holidays and we all have family. Hopefully we're planning great Zoom celebrations so that we're not creating super spreader events in our own families. But look, we all have like that uncle or that cousin or that family member who we know is on the brink of maybe disaster or some type of crisis. And we know when we're family and we care for that person, we know that in order to keep them from like falling deeper into crisis, we got to pull them in. We got to pull them into our care. We got to pull them into our support system. We got to make sure that they're at grandma's house for the holidays. We got to pull them in. For some reason, our justice system, and this is, I think, the core of why it has to be reimagined. Our justice system defies that logic. Our justice system has been built to identify people who are on the edges of our society and push them all the way out. I had a friend who I grew up with who re-entered our community back when I was on the city council, and I'll never forget. He said, "Melvin, council member," he said, "Look, they said when I got out, they said, go be a contributing member of community. But here's my question. If I can't live here, if I can't work here, if I can't go to school here, and I can't vote here, what is a contributing member of community?" And so we push people out to the edges in ways that exacerbate the disparity that they feel, that exacerbate the despair that they feel, and that exacerbate our public safety challenges. Our goal in St. Paul is to do quite the opposite, to identify people in challenge and crisis and pull them in. One of the examples of this work is a program we call Returning Home St. Paul. We know it's difficult for people who've re-entered our community to find housing. And we know that's something that keeps families in crisis and that keeps families in turmoil. And that's something that we have to address if we want to fundamentally transform our public safety, our public safety outcomes. Research shows us, and I like saying that because I like saying we need a public safety framework that's centered around research, data, and analytics, and not one that's centered around fear-based rhetoric and anecdotes that so often rule the day. Research shows us that when people who re-enter our community are able to be successful at finding housing and able to be successful at finding kind of the supports that they need, that they are significantly less likely to recidivate. We need to take that seriously. So through Returning Home St. Paul, we partner with landlords, we partner with renters, we partner with returning residents to make an investment to help mitigate the risk that landlords feel like they're taking when and if they rent to someone who has returned to our community from incarceration. It's work that we're committed to. We have built it in partnership with a fellowship that I was a part of with Bloomberg and Harvard. We had our innovation group at the city kind of build this out with significant public engagement. We're working closely with partners like Ujama Place, who are certainly no stranger to this space. And we just launched it. So we're in the process right now of pulling on partners on accepting applicants. And we look forward to engaging 20 residents in an 18-month period to demonstrate what types of outcomes we can produce. I'm sorry, I've got all kinds of notifications coming up on my computer. To demonstrate what kind of outcomes we can produce when we work together on a kind of on this level. It includes a housing access fund, which is sometimes referred to as like a contingency fund, to provide landlords who are participating in the program access to up to $3,000 reimbursement for costs that exceed their security deposit. And also includes supportive services for the residents or for the renters who participate. Our partners will support residents with their housing search or with their housing navigational support, with a security deposit, application fee assistance, and then case management and connections to other resources as needed. It's pretty exciting to me. It's exciting work. It's a part of all of this work that we are doing to reimagine how our community works. Our mantra is a St. Paul for all of us. And that has to start, all of that has to start with reimagining our justice system in a way that connects us to stability and not in a way that connects people in challenge to even deeper crisis. That's a fundamental goal of ours. It's a fundamental value of our administration. And I think as our city grows, as our city changes, as our city evolves, it's our only route to the future. So I'm excited to turn to a panel. I want to bring in some of these partners who have been working very closely with us on Returning Home St. Paul. And I'd like to just ask them to further lift up this issue of housing reentry and the partnership we've created here on the local level through Returning Home St. Paul. So first, I'd like to turn to Damontay Matthews. He's a participant at Ujamaa Place in St. Paul. I'd like for us to get a ground level understanding of the experiences of reentry and also the challenges faced by residents returning from incarceration. Damontay, would you please briefly introduce yourself and share the experiences you and Ujamaa men have had after returning from incarceration as you seek housing?
Yes, sir. Can you guys hear me fine?
Yes.
How are you guys doing today? Yes, my name is Damontay Matthews. I'm a part of the Ujamaa Place. I've been a part of the Ujamaa going on 3 years now. I just want to say, by me being placed in the housing, I just want to let you guys know what it helped me out with in my life. By me being placed in Ujamaa, it helped me out with getting my life back on track after incarceration. Prior to COVID and George Floyd, it also helped me with safety. It also helped me with stability because I was homeless at that time. And also by me coming to class 2 to 3 times a week, it also helped me with my priorities. At first, when I was trying to get my own apartment, my own housing, I just want to let you guys know the type of stuff that I was going through. Even though I had a job, I wasn't making twice the income for the apartment. Sometimes I'll be in a position where I would I'll be living paycheck to paycheck. So I wouldn't qualify for making twice the income. Also with the background check, that also was a letdown, and the credit score. So those are like 3 things that were holding me back, even though I had a job. I showed up on time. I was never late, but I kept on coming up short every time. Due to that, that caused anxiety, it caused depression, it caused low self-esteem, it caused low confidence due to the job opportunities I was getting, even though that I was showing up and trying my hardest every time. Ujamaa helped me with rebuilding those because I was at a low point in my life. By me coming there, they helped me with my self-esteem. They helped me with getting a chance to express myself. I was such in a dark place in my life. It just gave me a chance to express myself. And I just want to say thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak. And by you guys giving me an opportunity to speak, it just shows that you guys care and every voice counts and every voice matters. So I just want to close out by saying that. Or if you guys have any questions for me.
That's pretty powerful, and I appreciate you sharing your story. I'm going to come back to you if we have time to, because I want to highlight some of our other partners, but I really appreciate you sharing your story, and that's really powerful because we know, as I said earlier, that if we create a system that takes somebody like you, who we believe is a high potential individual in our community, who we know, we have had people who have re-entered our community and gone on to do amazing things if we give the chance. And too often our justice system, that phrase ends up being an oxymoron, because there is no justice when we don't give people a chance to kind of fulfill their full potential. Look, another one of our partners, and I appreciate you sharing those challenges, Damontay, because it alludes to just all of the different barriers that people face when they return to our community. I mentioned this kind of the perception that landlords have of a higher risk when they accept individuals who have returned from incarceration. One key partner in getting beyond those perceptions is HousingLink. I'd like to introduce Josh Dye, who's been helpful for us in creating the Beyond Backgrounds program at HousingLink, which we plug into really heavily with this program. Josh, would you just briefly tell us who HousingLink is, what Beyond Backgrounds is, and how it works, why it was developed, and some of the program outcomes you've experienced?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Mayor Carter, and thanks for sharing, Damontay. Great to hear your story and your perspective. So HousingLink, we've served as a nonprofit organization in the community since 1997. We were actually founded out of a fair housing lawsuit on the basis of race and poverty. There was some Minneapolis public housing that was torn down, and they did not have an adequate relocation plan for the low-income residents. And out of that lawsuit, there was a number of remedies that were identified to address that in the future. And one of those was that they would create a clearinghouse of affordable rental housing information. And HousingLink became that clearinghouse. When we began, we first started actually collecting all of the listings in the local newspapers, the Star Tribune, the Pioneer Press, and we would fax out those listings to up to 300 service agencies throughout the metro area, letting them know these are the housing opportunities that exist for individuals in the community. And then, of course, as the internet came along, all of those services shifted online to where today we have 1 million searches for affordable rental housing on our website every year. So if you are a renter with a Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher, looking for an open waiting list for project-based Section 8 or public housing, HousingLink is a good place to start that search to identify options that might be a fit for you in those situations. We don't have any influence on the rental market. We're more of a reflection of this is what exists. But if you have that low income and are looking for a place that's more affordable, whether that will accept a subsidy or that is what's considered NOAA housing, naturally occurring affordable housing, HousingLink is a good place to start. And then 3 years ago, in response to years of seeing renters with criminal background, low credit scores, recent evictions, have an incredibly difficult time finding a place to live, through the support of Minnesota Housing launching the program, Beyond Backgrounds was born. And the way Beyond Backgrounds works, Mayor Carter provided an excellent overview of it before, but if a landlord is willing to rent to somebody, say with a criminal background, in particular a felony or a low credit score or recent eviction, basically gives them a layer of free insurance. In the case of Returning Home St. Paul, they get up to $3,000 of free insurance beyond what's covered by the security deposit. So if there's damage to the unit, unpaid rent, if there were legal fees that happened or other unfortunate circumstances, it provides a layer of coverage at no charge to the landlord. And since we've started this, it's been about 3 years now. What we've just found in terms of program outcomes is the total number of participants housed has been 258. In some cases, landlords say, hey, I'm just glad that a case manager is involved or that there's some additional support. So we'll decline the risk fund, but we are still happy to rent to the individual. We've seen that in a number of cases. But in other cases, they're happy to accept that free insurance and some of the additional supports that come with it. And one of the things that is fascinating, so you might be wondering, all right, how many claims to the risk fund have you had since it started? Because it's one thing to get individuals housed. We also want them to get lease renewals and to continue, but also how often does a landlord make a claim? Well, of those 258 total housed, 152 have been housed with the Beyond Backgrounds fund directly tied to them. We've had 4 risk fund claims thus far. And so it really just goes to show that even though you have, Mayor Carter, you mentioned renters with a perceived higher risk, that when some of the right supports are in place, like Ujamaa Place, and the ability where beyond backgrounds, we check in each month with both the renter and the landlord to say, hey, was the rent paid in full? Any other issues we should be aware of, so that we can get ahead of anything before it develops. And it really goes to show that these programs can help individuals achieve stability. And the beauty of the risk fund is that it's not money paid in advance. It's only paid out if there is something needed on the back end. And thus far, that's only happened 4 times.
That's so incredible. And it's so contradictory to what I think many people's expectations would be, or the stereotypes that we get into our head. Tell me this, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on this. Why do we have this disconnect in terms of what our experience is? You know, obviously when we talk about people returning from incarceration, you know, people's mind goes to triple X murderers when we know that that's just not the case. And we have so many people who've been over criminalized by like our war on drugs here in America and so many different things. But like, why do you think that's the case? And how do we do a better job as a community of telling a story so that we're not just, I mean, ideally, if that's all, we wouldn't need the mitigation fund, because people would realize that that's not, that this perception of a higher risk actually isn't borne out by reality.
I'd love to hear Damontay's perspective on that first.
I can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I feel Mayor Carter, you are right. I feel like a lot of people are over criminalized. I feel like that's so big, because I feel like that's what slowed me down. I still feel like, even though I made a bad decision, I still feel like I was a nice person. Like I try my best to, you know, leave the past behind me and move forward and, you know, do so many good deeds. But at the same time, I was starting to feel like a hamster on the wheel. I was doing so much work, but I wasn't getting anywhere. And due to that, you know, it caused trauma, you know, and so basically what I'm trying to say, like by the HousingLink, by having someone come in to check in with the landlord, just being able to speak with the landlord, because I was in a situation where, by me being a young guy, not having anyone to speak for me, a couple times I felt like I was being mistreated by a landlord, or I was getting taken advantage of because I wasn't smart with my money. So by someone coming to check up on me just to make sure, hey, did this guy pay his rent? Did he pay it in full? Is the lease signed? And just double checking everything, making sure I dot my I's and cross my T's. It makes me have higher confidence within myself and in my program, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. I appreciate it. Josh, we're running out of time, but you know, we're talking about Returning Home St. Paul. Returning Home St. Paul has a few kind of additions that we've added on to Beyond Background, including support for application fees and security deposits, and also the wraparound services provided by Ujamaa Place. Can you just like literally in like a couple minutes share why you think those are important, how you think those will impact the outcomes of the program?
Yeah, of course, because when people are out searching for housing, sometimes, you know, cash is tight and they may not have, life happens and you may not have enough for that application fee. And so this Beyond Backgrounds program will provide up to $60 for application fees so that it supports the individuals in applying for the places where they're at. And that then, of course, allows them to spend that money in things that maybe are for core for their life, or to set up their home, or to be prepared. And also up to $500 for the security deposit. And so a couple of things that does. So it provides a bit of relief on the renter side. And then on the landlord side, it eliminates this concern about like, well, if they can't pay for the application fee, how are they going to pay for the rent? Or if they can't pay for the security deposit, how are they going to pay for the rent? And when you talk about perceptions being so powerful among people coming out of incarceration and then trying to find housing in the community, you have to, those perceptions are so much of what we're trying to overcome, so that we can, at least in the landlord's eyes, have actual supports that also bring that risk perception down, that it's like, okay, no problem with the security deposit. I feel good about that. No problem with the application fee. I feel good about that. They've got an excellent organization working with them to help them achieve whatever the goals they have and stability that they need. And I get this free layer of insurance on the side so that if something does happen, they're covered and they're going to check in with me on a regular basis. That all of that combined, support for the renter, financial relief for them, greater confidence for the landlord that this is something that, yeah, they can make an exception to their normal operating policy and procedure because so many of these additional supports are in place. And
Right.
so from both of those sides, both the confidence of the landlord as well as some of the relief to the renter, that's why some of those additional supports are so helpful.
Well, we're excited to prove that. Damontay, Josh, thank you so much for your help, and thank you so much for the work that you do day in and day out, and for showing that we really can reimagine our justice system. For everybody participating, look, I'm the mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota. We're neighbors to Minneapolis, the city where George Floyd was murdered. One of the questions I think this summer that I probably took more than any other from reporters from near and far was like, after this, like after George Floyd was murdered, like, what do you do now? And one of the most important things that I shared with them is we started that 3 years ago. We started that work 3 years ago. The reason is because my 12-year-old daughter, after that happened, one of the hardest conversations I've had in my life, she looked at me and she was confused. She could not understand why people were surprised that George Floyd was killed in the way that he was, or why people were surprised that people were so angry about it. This pattern is truly a pattern. It's played out over and over and over again. We've seen it on cell phone videos over the last 10 years or so. But my father and his father and his father and his grandfather could tell you the story of unarmed African-American men who've lost their lives at the hands of law enforcement. This is a pattern. This is a cycle that we're stuck in. And we know, and hopefully if you're on this call, it means that you know that unless we do something fundamentally transformatively different, unless we fundamentally transformatively rethink the way our justice system works, the way our criminal justice system works, the way our whole public safety frameworks work in America, that we'll be there again and again and again. And so my hope is that we don't find ourselves at a place where this happens even more brutally, even more obviously, even more disgustingly. And we find ourselves at the place where we're hashtagging someone else's name and we're chanting, say his name or say her name for someone else and saying, well, after this, what are we going to do? This has got to be a turning point. The energy that we've seen Americans literally in our streets across the country, in our boardrooms across our country, in our city halls across the country, saying this has absolutely got to change. I think that energy is the fire that can build our country, that can forge our country, that can forge this kind of new path for our country. This is a small part of that work, but I thank you, Minnesota Justice Research Center, for your leadership in our state of leading and guiding this work and being sort of the spirit guide for us in this work moving forward. I'm committed to it. I know you are too. Mark, I know that you have been for a very, very long time. And I'll tell you, as we do our work here in St. Paul, we're blessed and excited every day that we get to do it with such an incredible group of teammates. Damontay, Josh, thanks for joining us. And I'll give it back to you, Mark.